Sophia Loren was born in war-torn Italy, abandoned by her father, and told she was too plain and too poor to ever be a star. Yet she became the face of international cinema. But behind the fame was a woman carrying years of secrets, scars, and pain. And at some point, she vanished from the spotlight for a heartbreaking reason. But have you seen her lately? At 90, her appearance is making jaws drop, and not for the reasons you'd expect. What happened to the legend we grew up watching? And how is she turning heads in a way that has everyone in shock? From bomb shelters to beauty crowns. It's easy to look at Sophia Loren today and forget just how impossible her rise once seemed. But before the world ever called her a legend, Sophia grew up in a war zone, where glamour was only a word in the movies, and survival was the only thing that mattered. Born Sophia Villani Ciccoloni on September 20th, 1934 in Rome, her arrival into the world wasn't greeted with celebration or stability. Her father, Riccardo Ciccoloni, came from a well-off background, but he refused to marry her mother, Romilda Villani. And although he signed Sophia's birth certificate, that was the end of his involvement in her life, a decision that would shape Sophia's early years in painful and lasting ways. Romilda, for her part, wasn't an ordinary woman. Before life dragged her into hardship, she had dreams of becoming a star herself. In her youth, she had entered, and nearly won, a Greta Garbo lookalike contest. She'd even been offered a chance to work in Hollywood, but her strict family forbade it, and instead, she stayed behind in Italy. Those stifled dreams would eventually be passed on to her daughter, along with an unshakable belief that Sophia was destined for something more. Sophia and her mother settled in Pozzuoli, a small town near Naples, in the southern part of Italy. Life there, especially during World War II, was brutally hard. Poverty wasn't just a backdrop, it was the air they breathed. Food was scarce, clothing was patched together from scraps, and they shared a cramped home with multiple relatives. The war only deepened their suffering, and Sophia and her family were forced to hide in shelters just to survive. During one of these terrifying raids, young Sophia got injured and was left with a scar on her chin, a permanent reminder of the chaos and fear that defined her early childhood. Despite it all, Romilda never stopped pushing Sophia toward the spotlight she had once dreamed of for herself. She enrolled her daughter in local beauty contests, just so she could get noticed. At age 15, Sophia entered the Miss Italia beauty pageant under her birth name, and although she didn't win the crown, she walked away with a smaller title named Miss Elegance. This achievement was enough to turn a few heads and, more importantly, to open a few doors. Modeling offers followed, as did tiny roles in minor films. Her transformation began, and soon she got noticed by more important people, including Carlo Ponti, a respected film producer more than 20 years her senior. When their paths crossed in the early 1950s, Sophia was still unknown and unsure, but Ponti saw potential in her that others had overlooked. He took her under his wing, and more than that, he believed in her talent, not just her beauty. Ponti didn't just mentor her career, he actively shaped it. He helped her refine her image, guided her in choosing more serious roles, and encouraged her to change her name to something more cinematic. And so, Sophia changed her last name to Loren, a name that would soon be known around the world. But even with a powerful mentor behind her, things didn't change overnight. Success in the film industry was no guarantee, especially not for a girl from Pozzuoli with no formal training and a heavy Neapolitan accent. The world of cinema was already crowded with more polished actresses, and Sophia didn't quite fit the mold. She was taller and curvier than most, and carried herself with an earthy, unapologetic boldness that some casting directors didn't know what to do with. Still, she kept going. She accepted small roles in low-budget productions and appeared in comedic sketch films and melodramas, often with little pay. But every time she stepped in front of the camera, she got even more noticed, not just for her looks, but for her screen presence. Directors started to realize she could hold her own, and that there was a seriousness beneath the surface. Audiences, too, responded to her authenticity. In an industry filled with polished perfection, Sophia Loren felt real, like the kind of woman who had lived, survived, and carried that survival in every look and gesture. And yet, even as the industry began to take notice, Sophia's challenges were far from over. Fame brought its own pressures. She was still seen as an outsider in many ways, and breaking into international cinema, especially the tightly guarded gates of Hollywood, would prove to be a battle in its own right, building a name in a man's world. Sophia Loren's path to international stardom wasn't smooth or straightforward. It was built through quiet persistence, risky choices, and a refusal to change herself to fit the mold others tried to force on her. Even as her screen time gradually increased, she faced criticism from producers and casting agents who didn't know what to make of her looks. Her beauty was undeniable, but it didn't conform to the dominant beauty standards of the time. In a world where button noses and delicate features were prized, Sophia's strong Mediterranean face stood out. Sophia later revealed that she was once told to get a nose job if she wanted to go further, but she refused to change herself to satisfy anyone's idea of what a star should look like, holding on to the belief that her uniqueness was her strength, and time would prove her right. Still, she knew she couldn't rely on appearance alone. She needed range and substance. But most of all, she needed the right opportunity to show it. That opportunity came in 1958, when she signed a 5-picture deal with Paramount Pictures, a move that catapulted her from European stardom into international fame. The American film industry, fascinated by her exotic appeal and undeniable screen presence, saw her as a fresh new face that could draw global attention. It was a major moment for Sophia. She had finally crossed into Hollywood, the epicenter of global cinema, without sacrificing her identity. Her English, still heavily accented at the time, became part of her charm. Audiences loved her confidence, her warmth, and the charisma she brought to every role. But while the fame was real, so were the limitations. Sophia found herself being offered the same types of roles over and over again. She was either cast as the beautiful mistress, the fiery Italian, or the exotic seductress. She played these parts well, but she knew she was capable of more, and she wanted to prove it, not just to Hollywood, but to herself. That moment came in 1960, when director Vittorio De Sica cast her in La Ciociara. The film was a departure from everything audiences had seen from her so far. There were no glamorous costumes, romantic entanglements, or polished Hollywood lighting. Instead, Sophia played a working-class mother trying to shield her young daughter from the horrors of war. The role pushed her further than anything she'd done before. But Sophia didn't hold back. She poured her own memories of war-torn Italy into the role, channeling the fear and desperation she'd once felt as a child hiding in bomb shelters. Of course, the audience was stunned, and critics took notice, because when the Academy Awards were held the following year, Sophia Loren made history. She won the Oscar for Best Actress, the first ever awarded for a non-English language performance. It was a defining moment in her career. Not only had she proven that she could carry a serious, emotionally complex film, but she had also done it without compromising anything about who she was. After Two Women, Sophia entered a new phase in her career. And even with an Oscar to her name, she continued to face typecasting, but she resisted, choosing to focus instead on projects that allowed her to evolve. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, she transitioned into more mature roles, often portraying complex women with layered emotions. But even as her star rose higher, one man remained a constant force behind the scenes, in her career, and eventually in her heart. Their relationship raised eyebrows, faced legal complications, and was tested by time. And yet, it lasted longer than anyone ever expected. A love that refused to break. Sophia Loren's story isn't just about survival or stardom. It's also about love. Not the kind found in movie scripts or romantic headlines, but the kind that defied laws, crossed borders and endured decades of separation, scandal, and sacrifice. Sophia was quite young when she first met Carlo Ponti. He was 37, already a respected film producer in Italy, and married, but their first meeting wasn't romantic. He had simply been one of the judges at a beauty contest she entered, and he noticed her right away, not just for her looks, but for her presence. Something about her stood out, even then, and Ponti offered to mentor her. However, over time, that professional relationship deepened into something far more personal. But their bond wasn't easy to pursue. Italy at the time had no legal framework for divorce. Marriage was considered sacred, both by the Catholic Church and Italian civil law. Carlo Ponti's wife had no legal path to end their union, even if both parties wanted it. And this meant that any future with Sophia would have to be forged outside their home country and under intense scrutiny. Despite the challenges, Sophia and Ponti found a way. In 1957, they tied the knot by proxy in Mexico. Neither of them attended the ceremony, but representatives stood in their place. The union was legally recognized in Mexico, and for a moment, it seemed they had finally carved out space for their life together. But the happiness was short-lived, because Italian authorities refused to accept the foreign marriage. To make matters more complicated, both Sophia and Ponti were charged with bigamy. Ponti's first wife, though separated from him in practice, was still his spouse in the eyes of Italian law. And so, the media seized on the story, and the backlash was severe. Sophia, already a target of gossip for her rise to fame, now found herself painted by the press as a homewrecker and a young starlet who had dared to love a married man. Faced with public scandal and legal threats, Sophia and Ponti made the painful decision to annul their Mexican marriage in 1962. But they didn't separate. Quietly, they stayed together, waiting for a country, for a law, and for a moment when their relationship could finally be made official without fear. That moment finally came in 1966, when they became French citizens. Their divorce was finally legal, and their union could finally be recognized. That same year, they were married in a civil ceremony in Paris. This time, it was real and legal. Their marriage, though hard-won, was stable and lasting. Behind the glamour and constant public attention, their relationship remained grounded in mutual respect. Ponti continued to guide Sophia's career, but he also gave her space to grow and evolve. He didn't try to mold her into someone else. He simply supported her, even when she chose roles that challenged the norms of femininity or national pride. Together, they built a family, and in 1968, their first son, Carlo Jr., who would go on to become a renowned conductor, working with orchestras around the world, was born. 3 years later, in 1973, they welcomed their second son, Eduardo, who followed a creative path as well, not in music, but in film. Eduardo and Sophia share a particularly deep artistic bond. He directed her in Between Strangers in 2002 and years later in The Life Ahead, a Netflix film that earned her critical praise and introduced her to a new generation of viewers. That collaboration wasn't just professional, it was personal. The film explored aging, resilience, and love in its many forms, themes that mirrored Sophia's own life. Working with her son behind the camera added a sense of trust and emotional depth that few other directors could have captured. Sophia has always spoken about motherhood as one of her proudest roles. Though her career demanded travel, long hours, and a constant media spotlight, she worked hard to ensure that her children never felt like they were second to her work. She kept her family close, avoiding the trappings of fame that often fractured other Hollywood households. Now a grandmother, Sophia remains actively involved in her grandchildren's lives. She's opened up about how much joy she finds in watching them grow, and how much pride she feels in the lives her sons have built. Despite the chaos and noise that once surrounded her, her family has become a place of calm and a kind of emotional anchor that fame never could provide. Her marriage to Carlo Ponti lasted until his death in 2007, making it one of the most successful unions, especially by the standards of the entertainment industry. But even a life this grounded hasn't been without controversy. From political tension to legal accusations, there were moments when Sophia Loren's name made headlines for reasons that had nothing to do with film or fame. And some of those moments nearly threatened everything she'd worked so hard to build. When fame turned against her, Sophia Loren has always carried herself with grace, but that didn't shield her from controversy. In fact, the very choices that defined her independence in love, in film, and in life often placed her at the center of heated public debates. For someone who worked so hard to stay grounded, there were moments when fame seemed determined to test her resolve. The most persistent controversy in her life was her relationship with Carlo Ponti. Their love story, while genuine and enduring, was a scandal in deeply Catholic post-war Italy. At some point, Sophia was torn between her love for Ponti and her respect for her country's values. In the eyes of the law, they weren't husband and wife, and in the eyes of the church, they were living in sin. For years, that shadow lingered over them, even as they stayed together, quietly and without apology. But that's not the only romance-related scandal Sophia faced, because her personal life made headlines again during the filming of The Pride and the Passion in 1957. It was on that set she met Cary Grant, who was already one of Hollywood's most celebrated leading men. Their chemistry was undeniable, both on and off screen. By many accounts, the two shared a brief but intense affair. Grant reportedly fell in love with her and even proposed marriage. In her memoir, Sophia recounted the experience, saying, "I was torn between two men and two worlds. I knew that my place was next to Carlo. He was my safe harbor, even though I was still waiting for him to make a decision about our lives. Our furtive relationship couldn't go on much longer. At the same time, it was hard to resist the magnetism of a man like Cary, who said he was willing to give up everything for me. On our last night, he invited me out, looking more solemn than usual. Inside, I was afraid. There was a gorgeous sunset outside as he turned to me, looked me in the eyes, and said simply, 'Will you marry me?' My words got caught in my throat. I was like an actress in a movie who's forgotten her lines. It was a tempting offer, especially because Cary was admired around the world, charming, successful, and fully available in ways Carlo Ponti was not at the time. But Sophia turned him down. Years later, she explained her decision, simply saying that her life was with Carlo, not with Cary. Despite the pull of Grant's affection, she remained loyal to the man who had stood beside her from the beginning. The affair, though short-lived, continued to fuel gossip columns for decades. Another example of how her private life was constantly placed under a magnifying glass. However, the most serious legal controversy of her life didn't come until much later. In 1982, Sophia Loren was arrested in Italy on charges related to a long-running tax dispute. The allegations stretched back nearly 2 decades and accused her of underreporting income. Though she had always insisted that the issue stemmed from a misunderstanding of Italian tax law, the courts ruled otherwise. She spent 17 days in prison, a shock to fans who had never imagined the beloved actress behind bars. The arrest marked a turning point. Sophia left Italy and didn't return for several years. She continued working but avoided stepping foot in her homeland, fearing further legal complications. For someone so proudly Italian, the exile was painful. The issue dragged on for years, until finally, in 2013, more than 3 decades after the original accusations, the Italian Supreme Court cleared her name. The ruling stated that she had indeed followed the law at the time, and that her conviction had been based on outdated interpretations of the tax code. Sophia was vindicated, but the ordeal left its mark. Beyond legal troubles and romantic headlines, Sophia also dealt with controversy over her work itself, particularly over scenes in her films that some deemed too revealing. In movies like Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow, and The Priest's Wife, she performed scenes that for the era were seen as daring. Italian and American critics debated whether these choices empowered women or simply catered to male fantasy. But Sophia never saw herself as a victim of the industry. She made it clear that every scene, every costume, and every frame was her decision. She controlled her image. When asked about those moments, she would often remind interviewers that she had always been deeply conscious of how she was portrayed on screen. She wasn't careless with her career. She knew exactly where the line was, and when she crossed it, she did so on her own terms. But these scandals, while challenging, did not define Sophia. If anything, they revealed the strength beneath her elegance. But behind the composure, Sophia faced real personal struggles, including health scares, painful losses, and moments when even the strongest woman began to question what more life could ask of her. Quiet battles behind the spotlight. Sophia Loren's elegance and confidence have long defined her in the public eye. But behind that legendary poise were years filled with private pain, silent battles, and deep emotional scars that fame couldn't heal. Her life may have sparkled on magazine covers and cinema screens, but off-camera, Sophia faced struggles that tested her far more than any performance ever could. Long before motherhood brought her joy, it first brought her heartbreak. In the 1960s, as she was at the height of her career, Sophia suffered not one but two miscarriages. The losses were devastating. For a woman who had grown up with dreams of building the stable, loving family she never had, each failed pregnancy felt like a cruel reminder of something slipping further away. The emotional toll was heavy. She described feeling like a failure, not just as a woman, but as a wife. At a time when infertility wasn't openly discussed, she carried her grief quietly, out of view of the press and the public. Doctors told her she might never be able to carry a child to term, and the news crushed her in ways the world couldn't imagine. For someone who had already endured so much from war, hunger, and public scrutiny, this particular pain struck deeper than any other. It wasn't a role she could act her way out of, or a script she could rewrite. It was real, and it was devastating. But Sophia never accepted defeat easily. With the same quiet determination that had carried her through poverty and scandal, she sought treatment, followed strict medical advice, and rested for long stretches in order to protect her health. And then, in 1968, against the odds, she gave birth to her first son, Carlo Jr. And a few years later, in 1973, she welcomed her second son, Eduardo. The births marked a turning point in her life, not just physically, but emotionally. Becoming a mother gave her a new sense of purpose and brought healing in ways no award or recognition ever could. Yet, even as she embraced motherhood with joy, the shadows of her own childhood still lingered. Sophia had grown up without a father. Ricardo Ciccolone, though listed on her birth certificate, had walked out on her mother before she was born and made only fleeting symbolic appearances throughout her life. The absence left a mark, not just on her childhood, but on the way she viewed trust, love, and family. She often spoke about the emotional distance she felt from him and how the lack of paternal love created a sense of abandonment that she carried well into adulthood. That early pain gave her both a hunger for stability and a fierce determination to never let her own children feel that same void. In every interview where she speaks of her family, there's an underlying tone of protection and a promise to always be present, to always show up, and to never walk away the way her father did. Even in the years when she was winning global awards and starring alongside cinema's greatest icons, Sophia battled intense feelings of isolation. She was a household name, yet often felt completely alone. The pressures of maintaining a public image, the endless comparisons to other actresses, and the long stretches of time spent filming away from home wore her down. And in her earlier years especially, she struggled with self-doubt. The more she was praised, the more pressure she felt to live up to it. And in those quiet moments, without cameras or scripts, she sometimes wondered if the life she had worked so hard to build would ever truly feel like her own. In recent years, Sophia has continued to show just how resilient she truly is. In September 2023, she suffered a serious fall at her home in Geneva, Switzerland. The accident left her with a fractured hip and femur, a frightening injury for anyone, but especially for someone nearing 90. She was rushed into emergency surgery and spent weeks in recovery, away from public view. For fans around the world, the news was a jarring reminder that even icons are not immune to the vulnerabilities of aging. But if there's one constant in Sophia Loren's life, it's her refusal to give in. Not to gossip, not to grief, not even to age. Her personal struggles haven't dimmed her spirit. They've shaped it and given her depth, compassion, and a quiet courage. Now, at the age of 90, the world looks at Sophia not just with admiration, but with awe. And when you see how she carries herself, speaks, and still surprises everyone, even at this age, you just might find yourself gasping. Sophia's shocking appearance at 90. When Sophia Loren turned 90 in 2024, the world braced for a quiet milestone, a few reflective headlines, and some respectful tributes to her legacy. But what they got instead was something no one saw coming. A radiant, defiant, and almost impossibly elegant Sophia, stepping into another decade of her life with the same poise and presence that made her a star nearly 70 years ago. Her appearance shocked fans, not because she looked old or frail, but because she didn't. After a serious fall just months earlier, many had quietly assumed she might retreat from the public eye. Whispers of retirement swirled, with some fans speculating that the injury might mark the end of her on-screen presence. But Sophia dismissed those rumors, saying, "I don't want to think about legacy. I want to think about my next movie. I'll think of legacy once I retire, and I hope never to retire." Sophia has made it clear that, for her, age was just a number, and not one she intended to slow down for. Her 90th birthday celebration was anything but calm. Hosted in Milan, the event was filled with fashion elites, film legends, and longtime friends who came to honor her extraordinary life. Giorgio Armani, one of her closest friends and a lifelong admirer, led the tribute with words that carried both affection and awe. Sophia herself arrived in a diamond-studded gown that shimmered under the lights, paired with minimal makeup and that same unmistakable smile that once lit up cinema screens. Cameras flashed, but it wasn't just the dress or the diamonds that stunned people. It was her presence. Photos from the evening went viral almost instantly, with fans marveling at her ageless appearance. And perhaps the most powerful words came from Sophia herself. In a short speech, she said, "When I look in the mirror, I cheer for myself. I don't ask, 'Are you great?' or 'Are you beautiful?' No, it's how I feel inside, how secure I am, and how happy I am. That's what matters." So what's Sophia's secret to staying ageless? Well, people have been asking that for years, long before she even reached 90, and she's never been shy about answering. Her beauty regimen isn't built on expensive procedures or heavy cosmetics. Instead, it's rooted in simplicity, balance, and a deeply Italian appreciation for life. She swears by the Mediterranean diet, which includes olive oil, fresh vegetables, fish, fruit, and, yes, pasta. She's never given it up. Where many stars chase diet fads, Sophia stayed close to the flavors of her childhood. Olive oil in particular, she's always credited for keeping her skin soft and her energy high. It's not just a cooking staple, it's part of her beauty philosophy. Hydration, too, has been key. She drinks water constantly, avoids overindulging in alcohol, and rarely touches sugary foods. But she also refuses to deny herself simple pleasures. A good bowl of pasta, a glass of red wine, and a piece of bread dipped in oil aren't off-limits, but are also essential to her joy. When it comes to aging, Sophia has always taken a natural approach. Unlike many in her industry, she never turned to cosmetic surgery. She embraced every line, every change, as a reflection of her journey. Her face tells a story, and she never wanted to erase it. That choice hasn't just preserved her authenticity, it's deepened her public respect. She also stays active. Even in her later years, she maintains a routine of walking, stretching, and light movement to stay fit and healthy. She once said that her body is a companion she needs to treat well, not a project she needs to perfect. But the real source of her timelessness may be her mindset. Sophia has always believed that beauty begins in the mind. She surrounds herself with music, film, books, and family. Her creativity is still alive, and that, more than anything, is what keeps her young. She once joked that her imagination was more important than any cream or serum. And with the life she's lived, she just might be right. To this day, Sophia Loren continues to challenge expectations. She's not retiring or retreating. Instead, she's living fully, confidently, and unapologetically. For a woman who once slept in bomb shelters and faced down a world that rejected her, turning 90 is just another milestone. And judging by the way she carries herself today, Sophia Loren isn't finished inspiring us yet. What's your favorite memory of Sophia Loren? Drop your answers in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.